Hello, red shirts, and welcome to another episode of Follow Me and Die. I'm your host, Larry Hamilton, and today I want to talk about a slightly advanced topic with some things you can do with macros. And I'm not going to get deep into macros, it's just a couple of things I've run into in recent months with game prep and some things I was trying to do. And one is a cool new tool that you may find helpful, and another is I found out something that you can't do. And so I just want to give you a heads up on that. The first one is called Talk to Self. So I've got this little macro that I've got the button here on the table here. So I can just click the macro and it tells you that it's talking to yourself. And it gives you a message. You are now talking to yourself. Chat messages and dice rolls will not be broadcast to others until you turn this off and use talk to myself off to disable. And then if you click the button again that I've got for this macro, it turns it off and it says you're no longer talking to yourself. The good thing about that is say you've got a role that you want to do, but you don't want the players to see it, but your some reason your macros are not GM facing, or if you're a player and you're trying to craft a new macro during a game and you don't want to fill up the chat with all the junk from trying to figure out how to get your macro to work, you can turn that on. Now, the thing you need to remember is turn it off before you do any rolls that you want to show up in the game. I made the mistake of doing that one time and made a roll, and I'm like, hey, I had natural 20. And they're like, really? We don't see it. I'm like, oh no. So I took a screenshot of it to prove that I'd made the actual roll. So to avoid that, you want to make sure that probably don't want to do this during a game because you're as a player you can get in at any time. But I think that's helpful, especially as a game master. You probably don't want all your different roles and notes and stuff showing up in the chat that the players can scroll back through. And you probably want to keep your chat for the games for various reasons. So you don't want to have, because the only way to get rid of one thing in the chat is to delete the entire chat log, which is a little overkill. And so up here under the collection is where your macros are. And so I've got one called Talk to Myself, and the checkmark in bar makes it show up here. So if I take that checkmark out, it goes away, put it back, it comes back. And so the macro itself is very simple. Call it whatever you want. I just call it Talk to Myself because that's what it is. And you just put slash talk to myself. You don't need on or off because if it's off, first time you run it, it toggles it. It's like a light switch. First time you run it, it's on. You run it again, it's off. If it's off, run it and it flips it the other way. You can test your macro to make sure it's working before you do anything. And we come back over here, talking to yourself. And there wasn't the rip sound it makes when you roll something because talk to yourself is secret. And then you run it again and it turns it back off. Um, you can also add it to your token if for some reason you needed to do that. I think it's most useful for two purposes: as a player, not to fill up the chat if you're trying to craft some player specific macro, or as a game master if you're doing planning and rolling and you don't want to fill up the chat with your preparation rolls. If for some reason you wanted to keep your preparation rolls, then don't turn this on because it doesn't get logged to the chat. When I found that, I knew that was very simple. So if you want to make the macro, you just click add, name it, and then you just do, there we go. Go back to the chat, test it, talking to yourself. Not That's all there is to it. You just make sure you save it. And it's the one I called name. See that it does exactly the same thing as the other macro. There's not a lot doing macros, and you can find most of what you need in the Roll20 help information. I had a past video, a couple videos back, where I talked about where you can get information, and I linked to different things. If it's a macro you no longer need, like this one, you just hit delete macro. It asks, are you sure? You hit delete macro again, and that name macro is gone. So the other thing that I ran into is on rollable tables. I had a situation in my game where the players ran across a deck of many things. It wasn't the standard deck of many things, but a variation. And I wanted to do rollable tables that would like show the card and all this. And I had it as a GM roll, so it would not show up right away. Well, the problem with that is if you have a GM roll on a rollable table, it only works for the game master. So it doesn't work for the players. So I spent all this work building these t- macros to roll against the tables, and it didn't work. And so that's another thing to keep in mind if you want to dip your toe into macros. Doing a rollable tables, GM rolls on those only work for the GM. There may be a way around it. I haven't found it. But those are just two little quick tips I wanted to share. If you do macros, just start small and you can do quite a lot. I have all kinds of different macros, but that's more of an advanced topic. And since this is Roll20 for the absolute beginner, I'm not going to get into the details of macros. So for that, you can look at the Taking 20 Master Series for Roll20, where they get more into macros, and there's many others that have a lot on macros. If I get enough interest in the comments, I may share some of my more common macros in a separate video on its own, not part of this series. And so that's all I have for today. I thank you very much for watching. I want to encourage you that if you like what I do here, please like, comment, and above all, tell others, share. And if you're not already subscribed, I'd really appreciate more subscriptions. The more interaction on the videos encourages me to do more. As I shared, I had a health issue that I have a video on my channel to explain that. I'm basically back. My motivation is much better now that hopefully things are all behind me with that, and there'll be much more to come. So again, thank you for watching, and as always, game on.